Hey guys, what's going on with y'all? Welcome to Breaking Feud. This video I do want to talk about watches. This will be more of a vlog style, but essentially I want to talk about watches in general and why I guess more of a misconception on watches and whatnot, and just discuss different things. As time goes by and I start getting to more of the watch collection world, you know, I'm learning more and more things, especially since I work at Swatch and, I'm dealing with customers, learning about like all these brands and movements and all of that, which honestly is a cool thing, honestly. Now, I do tend to, there's certain watches I have purchased in the past, which I kind of regret purchasing. Um, but it's a good thing, for me. It's a learning curve for not to spend money on watches like that randomly, not to spend too much money on watches, but also not just get random ones. So yeah. Now, people, some people think about, when you're buying watches, oh, you gotta get like the top of the line Rolex or whatnot. And most people don't have that conception of, hey, if you want a watch collection, you gotta get top of the line ones. But that's if you can afford it. There's a lot of good watches that you can get in a more affordable pricing, but there's some which is worth spending a lot more. But it's all about being able to afford it, right? It's kind of like, upgrading your smartphone. You shouldn't upgrade your phone every year if you don't have the money, or, not a lot of people have enough money to kind of just spend on cool clothes or anything, right? You should make sure you're able to have money in the bank to be able to live the basic things of being able to pay for a roof over your head, food, water, and all the basic necessities essentially. But honestly, coming from a guy who's been buying watches for a while and has resold a couple, given away some for free, and you know deal with people with more expensive watches that I don't have. I've been learning a lot, so I don't have a complete understanding, but it's like I've been kind of like learning about it, and kind of, in a sense, I was able to kind of form an opinion on it and kind of change my views on it essentially. Honestly, there's a lot of nice watches, not a lot of cool ones to get and whatnot. You really don't need a whole bunch of watches to have a watch collection. Honestly, you just really need like at least a minimum of 3 to 5 watches in your watch collection. But in order to have a collection, you honestly should stack up on cash in order to afford watches. Um, and honestly, most people have this idea of like, oh my god, I have to have at least minimum of 10, grow out more. No, you really don't. It's really having the money to actually have it, because I've seen a lot of people where I've talked to a lot of people where they buy a whole bunch of like Invictus to add to the watch collection, just because like as they keep buying more, they don't have enough money to buy more, like a little bit more pricier watches. Like, for example, I recommend people, like, if they're getting into watches more basic, maybe go with a G-Shock. But if they want to spend a little bit more, around the $300 to $500 price range, you got brands like Seiko, which I would recommend having a Seiko, at least a bare bones of a Seiko or a G-Shock in your collection. And then if you want to spend a little bit more money, but still be in the budget field, Hamilton is a brand I would recommend. Tissot's another one, and then as you get to more of the expensive price ranges, there's Rado and whatnot. Um, you don't really need to have the highest brand, but at the same time, you should be able to have the money to afford like nice watches. Because I would say, when you're buying, if you're gonna have a watch collection, it should be a case where, I guess in a sense, you buy something that you like, but also that has good quality. You got brands like Gucci and whatnot. More clothing brand companies that sells watches, but those are really expensive. But I don't think it's worth the price. So you want to be able to look at brands that actually specify in making good watches. So yeah. Now a lot of people do say, hey, if you have an Apple Watch, you're not a real watch enthusiast, and what Apple's doing is killing the market. Now, yes and no. I guess there's, from what I've seen, because I work at a Swatch store which is next to an Apple store, and I've seen a whole bunch of Apple Watches around. Now, yes, from the time when everyone had watches to the 21st century. So from the 21st, when the 21st century happened, there was a more of a decline in watch collection and whatnot. But also you gotta remember this was early days of internet, so there were a lot more people who didn't know about watches. I grew up in a time where I was able to use the internet to kind of do more research about watches and whatnot. And this helped me land a job at Swatch. But what Apple did for the watch industry is pretty cool. Well, actually, two brands kind of made a major impact within the 21st century: Apple and Swatch, essentially. Let's start with Apple because they were the first ones in a sense. So, yeah. Now, Apple's not the first brand to get into the whole into the whole smart device space, especially with the smartwatch. But just like all their other products, they were able to successfully make a really good product that works well with the ecosystem. And what Apple did was they were able to get everyone into having a watch on their wrist, which is a major thing. Because before then, most people don't. They will, and from what I've seen, if people got watches, and especially kids like me and my age at that time, they will have like either most of them won't have watches, or if they did, it'll be like a cheap digital watch, not even like a Casio style. I think there was a very few amount of people that had stuff like G Shocks, and mind you, G Shocks, like, yes, they're pretty good price, but not kids don't really have that kind of money to spend on a G Shock. So there was a handful of kids that had G Shocks, which was a pretty cool thing to own. There were a handful of kids that had Timex and Casios, and those two watch brands are god tier. But most people had but most of the people who had watches had like cheap digital watches, and they weren't like the best design. They sort of broke easily and whatnot. But everyone never wore a watch, right? What Apple did was made a good um, device where a smartwatch where it combines like the health stuff with the Apple ecosystem and computer in one device, and in a way, for like around 200 bucks, it's a pretty cool design. It's a pretty cool watch to own. And that's why you see a lot of kids, a lot of elders, everyone in every age range have an Apple Watch on their wrist. So, yeah, honestly. Another company which I just mentioned, Swatch. Now, Swatch is a really big deal. Now, you might be thinking of the more balsamic gent slash new gent design brand. Yes. I mean, if you look at the watches itself, they're not too crazy. They're fun, but people are like, oh, it's a whatever brand. You don't understand. People think they're just whatever watch. They're actually pretty cool watches. They have like every design from like cool fun ones like those to like, you know, diverse watches to more of a dressy watch. But as a brand in a whole, as a whole brand, they did a remarkable job, right? Especially the history, started in 1983, around the quartz crisis. You guys can do research on it. There's a whole video and an article about Swatch as a brand, what they did. Now, Swatch, and most people don't know, especially the customers that come into our store. Unless if you're a watch enthusiast, most people don't know. Even watch enthusiast people don't even know this. But they came out, and the brand came out in 1983. around the quartz crisis, where a lot of brands were about to file for bankruptcy and whatnot, and what have you. Swatch came in, made so much money that they were able to acquire like 21 brands, and this includes brands like Omega, Blancpain, Hamilton, Tissot, Rodel, Longines, just to name a few. And they came out, was able to acquire all these brands and have them function as their own little individual companies, right? That's a good thing in the watch world. But with the consumers, what they did in the consumer world was pretty cool in the 80s. But obviously, they sort of died down around the early 2000s. It was not until recently, around 2022, at the time of recording, like 2.5 years ago, they were able, because they own Omega, they were able to do a collaboration with Omega and release the Moonswatch. Here's my personal one. So this is my personal one with a third-party strap, but obviously if you guys have seen Moonswatch around, it has uh, a Velcro strap. But what they did was so remarkable. So if you guys don't know, this is so with the Moonswatch collection, they chose the Speedmaster model from Omega and kind of made a cheaper alternative version. Now, for consumers, so a lot of consumers, right? And this is specifically for consumers. When you talk about, brands, you're not going to go into depth about like each model, right? If you talk about cars to a normal consumer, they're going to list you out, the brands like Ferrari, Lexus, Mercedes, but they're not going to specify each individual like specific models that are pretty cool in the car world. Same goes for watches. Not everyone's gonna go into each specific model, but because they chose a specific model, which is the Speedmaster, people were able to get into the whole watch world, do a little bit more research about what this about the significance of the Speedmaster, which has a lot of significance, and brought a lot of consumers into the world of watches. And honestly, for something like this in a way help customers and consumers get into the world of watches, having a really cheap brand or having a really expensive high-end luxury brand be affordable after tax close to $300, which is good because for the price point of an Omega usually is around minimum $300, for a Speedmaster is like around $7,000, right? This is for 300, and in a sense that's the deal, right? Usually people are like, oh, I'll get like a replica or whatnot, but they will have to pay for a cheaper price. And usually it's not that great of a quality. You can sort of see, at least this is the more authentic, actual Omega licensed branded watch, which is in collaboration with an actual brand. So why just pick up this in a sense? And in a sense, I've seen a lot of customers that will come in and see that and they're like, what's the price behind that? Oh my God, that's so cheap. Let me get it. Which is pretty cool. Now this can help people get into the world of watches. And I wish there were more collaborations like that. If G-Shock decide to collaborate with AP on their AP Royal models and do a thing with Swatch where like G-Shock will manufacture the actual watch itself, but they will have the same design, mold, and the logo of AP on their watch. I feel like that will help both brands out, in a sense. You really don't need to have the most flashiest watches. This honestly, wear it with a suit, play with sports on it, like throw it, and it'll survive. And on top of that, in terms of specifications, actually beats out certain competitors that are much more expensive. This one in particular, let me pull it out. So this has 655 feet of water resistance, which is 200 meters. This Seiko has around, I think, 100 feet of water resistance, if I'm not mistaken. But that goes to show, like, they really built this really well. I mean, this is coming closer towards the water resistance rating for a you know, a diver's watch, like a cheaper diver's watch, which is pretty cool. I have a watch from Swatch which they collaborate with Blancpain. Blancpain makes diver's watches, and this specifically has 300 feet of water resistance. This beats it out. And honestly, at this point, if you're looking for a quality watch and not really the look, this is the way to go. And there's like more professional G-Shock models, which looks more professional with a metal encasing and all that for a really good price, and I will recommend just buying it. But, it's one thing to buy something that you like and another thing to buy for investments. Two separate things. So, yeah.